Hello and welcome to another edition of Election Insights. I'm Neal Kelley, Registrar of Voters for Orange County. Joining us today is Eugene Lee, Voting Rights Project Director of the Asian Pacific American Legal Center of Southern California, otherwise known as APALC. The mission of APALC is to advocate for civil rights, provide legal services and education, and build coalitions to positively influence and impact Asian Pacific Americans and to create a more equitable and harmonious society. APALC was founded in 1983 with broad community-based support and is now the largest organization in the country focused on meeting the legal needs of one of the nation's fastest-growing populations. APALC serves more than 15,000 individuals and organizations each year through direct services, community education, training, and technical assistance. Eugene, welcome and thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk to you about the upcoming elections,
Sure.
and obviously there's a lot of things that are going to be happening here in 2012. And the first one is, what do you see as the need for bilingual support here in not only Orange County, but the state based on the census?
Right. Well, Orange County is covered under Section 203 of the Federal Voting Rights Act, which is an important law that was passed by Congress in 1965. And Orange County is covered by Section 203, which requires the county to provide assistance in several languages, specifically Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Spanish. Other counties in California are also covered under Section 203, and the way it works is that the Census Bureau periodically releases a list of which jurisdictions and which languages Section 203 applies to.
Which they did this summer.
That's right. And so there are a couple of counties in California that have new language requirements. Orange County is not one of them. The current language requirements for Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Spanish are what they were before. But some other counties have new language requirements. For example, Sacramento County has a new requirement to provide assistance in Chinese. Alameda County was already covered for Chinese and Spanish, and now is also covered for Filipino and Vietnamese. And there are a couple of other counties as well that have these new language requirements, which I think reflects population changes over the past decade, which we saw in the census data.
And what does your organization do to ensure equal access or to assist in equal access for voters statewide and probably even throughout the nation?
Sure. Well, my organization does a variety of work, and one of those areas includes voting rights, which is to look at federal laws and state laws that provide access for voters. And we work with election officials at both the local and county level, and also work with state officials. We work with legislators to try to make sure that these laws are fairly implemented, to make sure that all voters have access to the ballot as these laws intend, including the Federal Voting Rights Act. So our work is nonpartisan. We don't do it for any incumbent or partisan motivation, but rather to try to ensure that these laws, which are on the books, are fairly implemented. One of the things that we do is we conduct something called poll monitoring on Election Day. So we organize volunteers from the community and train them about what goes on in polling places, what kind of things they should be seeing, what kind of election procedures poll workers are supposed to follow. So we train volunteers on these things, and then we send them out to poll sites on Election Day. And the volunteers are not to interfere or obstruct the way elections are run, but rather to provide third-party observation roles for Election Day. And so we train these volunteers to go into poll sites to make sure that translated materials are displayed as they should be, or that polling sites have bilingual poll workers. Poll workers we know are very committed to serving voters on Election Day. We know that voter registrars are very committed, but not everything goes right on Election Day. It's a big operation, and
Sure.
Sometimes things don't happen as they should. And so part of what these volunteers do is they serve as an additional set of eyes and ears for election officials. That's how we like to see it, where volunteers spot problems that should be fixed. They let APALC, my organization, know, and then we can work with county registrars to let them know, hey, we saw this problem at this poll site or at that poll site, and is there a way you can fix it by, let's say, sending a replacement poll worker that didn't show up, or to make sure that poll workers know that they should be putting out translated sample ballots, for example, if those weren't out.
And actually, I should speak to, from Orange County's perspective, it's actually been very helpful to work with your organization because it is that extra set of eyes like you talk about, and it allows us to respond to issues and be on the ground much quicker than if we didn't have that. So it's actually very helpful for us. Where have you seen the largest growth of Asian Americans in California? I mean, do you have, off the top of your head, some data on that?
Well, statewide, looking at both Asian Americans as well as Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, from 2000, the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander population grew about 15.5% from 2000, and it was one of the largest growths on a percentage basis in the state. So we know there's been tremendous growth across the state. There's been growth in areas where there were already existing large populations of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Native Hawaiians, including Orange County. So Orange County, I don't have the percentage off the top of my head, but among counties, it actually experienced one of the highest growth of any county in the state for the Asian American population.
Right. And we've seen that certainly, and you know, from the standpoint of the growth in the Vietnamese community, we've seen a lot of growth there, as well as the Chinese and Korean community. And we were talking a little bit earlier today about the growth in registered voters in the Korean community. You know, in Orange County, we've had some very strong growth in that area as well. So let's talk about the Voting Rights Act for just a second. And you know, you and I are both on the same page on this. This is a very critical piece of legislation and law that is very important to make sure equal access is obtained. What are your thoughts on the Voting Rights Act in general? And it was reauthorized in 2006, we should say.
Right. And that effort in 2006 was something that Congress undertook. The Voting Rights has a number of provisions, including Section 203, which I mentioned. And Section 203 and a couple of other sections of the Voting Rights Act were set to sunset in 2007 unless they were renewed or reauthorized. And Congress did pass legislation in 2006 to renew Section 203 and some other provisions for another 25 years. And that legislation was signed by the president. And you know, it was an effort that Congress undertook that was what I think was very well informed. The congressional record supporting why these provisions should be reauthorized is something. The number of pages goes into 4 figures. It's over 1,000 pages long. Congress held a number of hearings about why there was a continuing need for these sections. Stakeholders across the country sent in testimony about why these provisions are important. My organization contributed to this, so we sent in information about why language assistance under Section 203 has been very important for Asian American voters, how it's enabled them to participate in an equal way to the rest of the electorate, to help Asian American voters overcome language barriers, and to demonstrate the continuing need for language assistance. I think looking down the road in 30, 40 years, I think everyone would like to get to a place where our education system is at a point where language barriers don't get addressed, or that language barriers do get addressed in the education system, that there are sufficient amounts of ESL classes available. But I don't think we're at that point yet, and so we're glad that Section 203 was reauthorized. Just to give you, some information about why we think it's needed. We do, in addition to the poll monitoring work, we have another project at APALC that does voter research and exit polling. And so we've done some exit polls here in Orange County, and we did one in 2004, which found that about a third of Asian American voters actually voting, not just registered, but actually voting, indicated that they had some difficulty speaking or reading English. And that if you look at Chinese American, Korean American, and Vietnamese voters, that many of those voters needed language assistance provided by your office. So, for example, a majority of Vietnamese American voters actually voting indicated that they relied on either translated materials or bilingual poll workers that were provided by the registrar. And we think those numbers are compelling. They indicate very strong need for large numbers of Asian American voters to have language assistance. And we think that speaks to the continuing importance of Section 203.
Right, right. Well said. And so, Eugene, we're almost out of time here. Just real quick, what do you see as the one single biggest challenge in 2012 for elections in operations?
Sure.
It's a big question.
Right. I don't know if I can choose just one. I think there are two. One is voter education around the top two primary. There's also election administration challenges as well around the top two primary, Prop 14. But there's a lot of voter education that needs to be done to make sure that voters understand these changes, what they're going to see on the new ballots in 2012. And then the second one is challenges that vote-by-mail voters may face because of possible closures of postal offices across the state, across the country. And so there's questions about whether voters are going to be sending in their ballots back in time. And I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done to tell voters voting by mail, go ahead and send your mail ballots in earlier than you normally would.
Right, right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because here in Orange County, we're fortunate that the two distribution facilities that we have and we use are not on the list for closure. So I'm thankful in that regard, but you're right, there's many up and down the state that may be impacted. So you want to give your website, your organization's website?
Sure. It's www.apalc.org.
Great. Eugene, I know you're busy. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us next time for another edition of Election Insights right here in Orange County. Thanks again.